night, 2 ducks and a frog were swimming out in a pond. You probably heard this story, and they were talking about how the pond's drying up. And they said, what are we going to do? And the duck said, well, we know of a pond over there that's just a whole lot bigger than this. This still got plenty of water. And they said, the frog said, well, it's all right for you, but how am I going to get there? It'll take me forever. So they planned together and came up with an idea that 2 ducks would hold a stick in their mouth, and between them as they flew, and the frog would grab one with his mouth and they could carry him over too. Worked out great. They were flying along, everybody was happy. They flew over an old farmer and he looked up and said, wow, isn't that neat? I wonder who thought of that. And the frog said, I did. Well, his pride got in his way. He wanted to show that he thought of it and it got in trouble. I want to talk today about being humble. The girl and the general. The story of Naaman and the Jewish girl who told him about Elisha. We started last week. The girl, she is a good influencer. She was able, even though a young person, a lot of things we talked about why she was a good influencer. Today we want to talk about the general, Naaman. Let's look at the, yes, be humble. Let's go on down, look at the scripture. The king of Aram, remember we said this is Syria, Aram and Syria the same, had great admiration for Naaman, the commander of his army. Because through him the Lord had given Aram great victories, which is interesting. That Lord, as Jehovah, helped them defeat Israel. But though Naaman was a mighty warrior, he suffered from leprosy. Naaman was on top of the world. He had everything. And then he got leprosy. And man, I'm sure Naaman was a man of pride, but it was his humility that saved him in the end. And so that's why we want to talk about be humble today. Humble is a sort of a hard thing to pin down sometimes. Humility, you know, one of the things I noticed about me, I am really good about being humble. Okay, that's supposed to be a joke. You see how when you say you're humble, you sound like you're proud talking about it. And so I like this quote that C.S. Lewis said about humility. Try to nail it down a little for better. He said, humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is not, oh, I can't do anything. Oh, shucks, I'm no good enough. I can't do anything. No, that's not humility. Humility is thinking of yourself less. You're not always thinking about, oh, what's in it for me? Does everybody see me? Does everybody like me? Do they know I did it? That's not humility, that's pride. So we want to talk about, you know, and it sounds sort of fun. We said, be brave, be resolute, be an influencer, be humble. That doesn't sound like it fits. But I think the way to be brave and to be resolute and to be an influencer is to be humble. And of course the Bible told us that even Jesus humbled himself, even to the death of the cross. Our example. Now let's look, why was Naaman, what temptations did Naaman have to be proud and made it hard for him to be humble? Well, we'll tell the stories, we talk about it. It was hard because of race. He was from Syria. Syria was the conquering country over Israel, and yet that was where his answer was. So he could have been proud. Since the history of the world, the human race has been proud about their group, that they're better than the other. Our country is better than yours. Our language is better than yours. My color is better than yours. Whatever I have, my group is better than yours. Even my city is better than yours. My college is better than yours. And we have a temptation to look down on the other. And he could have been proud because of his race. We are Syrian and you are Israeli. And we can be proud today, which we shouldn't be, of I'm white and they're black. Doesn't it sound bad to even say that? Well, so surely if it does, we shouldn't be doing it, right? Or I'm black and they're white, and all whites are. And all blacks are. All Asian people are. When you bring it out in light, it sounds nasty, doesn't it? Because it is. Because we're not better than anybody else because we're this color, because we're this country, because we're this accent of our language. I hated it. Some comedian came out and said, at least we got a president's wife now who doesn't speak with an accent in it. What a jerk! The former president's wife spoke 5 languages. He's going to put it out because she has an accent? You go speak 5 languages and let me see how your accent is, big man. We shouldn't look down somebody. If somebody comes to our country and speaks another language, English, with an accent, well, they do better than I do with their language. Because I don't speak any other language. So we ought to be careful about being better with pride because of race or who we are. Okay, what else can he get? His accomplishments. He did what a general's supposed to do. He defeated his enemies. And he could. Now this one's a little tough because it's not wrong just, say, well, I did a good job today and I feel good. Or I fixed that in the house and I feel good. Or I got this bonus at work and my boss. There's nothing wrong with feeling like that. But it's when we get accomplishments and we look down on those who we don't think has the same accomplishments. And we get proud about it and say, you should be like me in your accomplishments, you see. That's when it's dangerous. And he could have done that. He could have been proud because of his position. He was the commander. He was the 5-star general of Syria. He had position. And if we're not careful, when we get to be a boss, we get raised up a level. When we're in a, we somehow now feel like, well, we're not down like these lowly people. And there's a temptation to act like that. He could have been tempted to pride because of his relationship. He knew the king. The king had great admiration for him, he said. And we like to be name droppers sometimes. Nothing wrong with that, but I know such and such. I'm going to tell you, I know Marvin Briggs. I talked with him just the other day. And that is pretty big because he's a good guy. Or I can say any of your name. But my point is sometimes we think because we're some relationship with somebody that is higher in the world's estimation anyhow, that we're better. That we're better than them because they don't have that relationship. And, which one reason I'm glad we got rid of, or left England. America left England. I like England. But they still have these nobility people over here think they're better just because they were born to somebody who's nobility. You're not better because you were born to nobility. Or caste system in India, same thing. So position should not make us proud. Or authority. Sometimes you get in at work or if you're in an army, you tell everybody what to do, and then you get home, you try the same thing. Ordering people around. And then you find out your wife don't go along with that. But authority, there's nothing wrong with authority. We should have authority. We're all under authority. But we should not think that authority gives us the right to look down on others. Or wealth. Now I say this, I guess, because the king of Syria gave him $1 million worth of gold, silver, and clothes to take to Elisha. So I figure he was paid well. I figure the commander of the armies had wealth. And you know what? There's a temptation to be a little bit proud when you have some more money. And look down on poor people. As if, well, those poor people, if they were just as whatever I am, if they were just as hard a worker or smart or intelligent or whatever as I was. But now we don't want to actually say it like that. Sometimes we're tempted to look down on people because they're poor. Now, I'm not saying everybody shouldn't work to give, they should, but we don't know, no reason for us to be arrogant because we've now got a little money. Amen on that one? Yeah. Because we're mostly all poor, so we should be amen. Gender, I say this again, I'm sort of surmising this, but in a lot of societies throughout history, men have had a little bit of an attitude towards women being a lower value. And what we don't realize, a lot of people don't realize, is that Christianity is what upended that. That Paul said, and the others in the New Testament. Now, that's not neither Jew or Gentile. You're the same level. You can't say you're better because you're Jew. You can't say it's not male or female. You're the same value. You're the same ability. You are both equal in God's sight. Now, you may not be equal in the things you do in your personalities. I'm not saying that. There is a difference. God made male and female, two different genders. I'm not going to get on that. But there's no reason for a male to think that I'm better than a woman, or no reason for a feminist to say, to lift up women to put down men. We don't need to do that either. All men are blah, blah, blah. Say, fill it in. We don't need pride either way. And we see that. All right, so he had a lot of reasons to be tempted to pride. And I believe he was a proud man. But he had to get rid of that pride. So, how Naaman showed humility to get where he needed to be, a happy ending. Well, first he listened to a girl, a non-Syrian, non-adult slave girl, and listened to what she had to say. We talked about that last week, how she was an influence in spite of that, her position, which showed something good about her credibility. But he had to humble himself, and he had to humble himself then to go to the king. You know, as a proud man, as he had to be as the commander, he has to go to the king because why? He's desperate. And desperation, a lot of times, is what drives people to humility and drives people to God. They think they're God. I'm doing all right without God, and then something happens. Cancer, COVID, break up in your marriage, get fired at work, money comes crashing down, and now you're desperate. And that's all right. God didn't mind you calling on when you're desperate. But you got to humble yourself. And he had to humble himself, and that comes the king. And he hadn't even bring it up, but you know, I've got this leprosy. I can't get rid of it. It's a non-curable, incurable disease. And so he goes to the king, and I imagine, well, what do you think? Why should you go to Israel? Well, my little maid told me that. You know, you think about it. You got to be humble to go to your king with this kind of word. But he had to humble himself. He's going to get anywhere. And he didn't let what he thought was disrespect. Now, what am I talking about? Well, he finally gets over to Israel. He goes over to Elisha the prophet. And what does Elisha do? He doesn't even come out. Elisha stays inside the house and sends out his servant and said, go and tell him to dip in the river. And he said, what? He didn't even come out. See, look at this man. He was the commander of Syria, the conqueror of their armies. He's used to people coming and sort of bowing and scraping to him, and Elisha wouldn't even come out. And right then, he could have went back to Syria and started to. But he also listened to his servants and officers. They said, come on now. If he'd have told you some great thing, you would have done it. He told you this, to dip in the water. Why don't you try it? Again, what did he have to do? He had to humble himself to listen to others. And you say, oh, well, that's easy. What universe are you talking about? It's not easy for most of us to listen to others tell us we were wrong, or that we need to change, or here's a new idea. Well, a lot of marriages get in trouble. Pride. Pride. Instead of humbling ourselves and listening when they try to help us, the person closest to us, we won't listen. And we say things like, I'm not being a doormat for any man. I'm not letting any woman henpeck me. And I've heard both of those from people who needed to humble themselves but kept butting their heads with each other. Humility is what's needed, but pride is what hurts us. He had humility and listened to others. And so, what else did he do? Well, then I forgot to include this. He didn't cut off his nose despite his face. And I was sitting with my grandchildren a few years ago eating breakfast or something. And I said, well, at least he didn't cut off his nose despite his face. I said, Papa, cut off his nose? What are you talking about? And so I explained that if sometimes the people get so mad or so proud that they won't do something that helps them. It hurts them to do that, but they go ahead and do that. And of course, they still didn't quite get it, but they will after a while. But that's what you do when you cut off your nose. I'm going to show them. I'm going to show that doctor can't tell me what to do. I'm not going to take that medicine. Yeah, you showed him all right. That's cutting off your nose to spite your face. I'll show you face, see? And that's what he could have done. I'm going to show Elisha. He can't deal with me like that. I'm going back to Syria. Boy, that'll really show Elisha. See what we do when we're proud? He calls us to do such dumb things, like even hurt herself, to show that nobody's going to mess with me. Now, I know all these things because I do them so well, okay? And it was faith. faith. It was not works. They said, and not the money he brought, because Elisha didn't even take it. And it wasn't the works. It was just you do what Elijah, you obey, and faith and obedience go together. That shows your faith. Dip in the water. He said, don't we have better rivers at home? They are Alabama and the Farpar. I like that name, Farpar. I should have named one of our kids Farpar. Farpar, go bring me the Oreos or something like that. But anyhow, don't you have better rivers? And no, you got to. But he went ahead and did something, even though it's, it seemed like it could have been a better thing, and it wasn't. And they said, wouldn't if he'd asked you to do some great thing, wouldn't you have done it? He just asked you to dip in a river. And this is the same way, of course, we come to God, by faith. Not works, not money, by faith. But again, step by step, Naaman has to humble himself. And then, by dipping in the river in front of others, I thought about that. I think that's a little bit, humbling. Here's the officers and your servants and people standing on the bank, and you dip down once and you go underwater. This is so stupid. And you dip down again. I can't believe I'm doing this. Everybody's watching. Can't you see that? You dip down 3 and 4, and they're all watching you. That was humbling for a man like him. And maybe this was all part of the point why he had to do it, to humble himself, because that's what he needed. And he went down finally 7 times. And he came up clean. He humbled himself even by fear of failure. He could have not worked in his mind. I might do it 7 times and I'll be the laughing stock. I've still got leprosy. Which holds a lot of people back. From trying a new ministry, a new business, some new venture, learning this, doing this, stepping out. I might mess up and look stupid. And we don't want to look stupid. What is that? Pride. And so fear of failure stops us many times from even trying anything that we ought to try and do. But he went over and he overcome that fear of failure and what they thought about him, and he dipped in the river, and it says his skin was like a baby's. The leprosy was gone. Can you imagine that if you had any incurable disease that was going to get worse and worse and worse, and it was gone? His humility is the thing, of course, his faith in what God did. And then the risk of failure, and then also becoming in a different religion, because he said, he had his own, their own false gods there in Syria. And he comes to Elisha and said, I want you to know there's only one God. Which was crazy for that word, because everybody thought, you have your God, and we have our God, you have your God. And he said, no, I know there's only one God. Jehovah is the only God. I know that now. And he was humble enough to say, it's not Rimmon back in Syria, that false idol. A lot of people, they won't even change and become a Christian because of the pride of changing to something else. But he also humbled himself and said, I believe in Jehovah now, and he's the one I'm going to worship. And he changed in his attitude towards Elisha, because he said, would it be all right if I took some dirt home with me? And you say, isn't it? Now you read that in 2 Kings 5. That's a little strange. He's going to take a couple of loads of dirt home with me. But that was because in those days they believed that you worship, your God was on your dirt, and that signified to him, I'm worshiping Jehovah by taking Israel's dirt. Because he was sincere about serving and worshiping Jehovah the rest of his life. He said, when my king bows to worship Rimmon, I'm not, in my heart, I worship Jehovah. And Elisha says, go in peace. He was a changed man. And so I say, yes, in the next one, the reason we know about Naaman was because of his humility. If he hadn't humbled himself, we wouldn't be telling this story today. And Naaman's life was changed because of his humility. If he had not been humbled himself, he would have stuck with leprosy and never turned to Jehovah the God. He had to humble himself. So now let's apply it to us real quick. Now, this is where it's in your bulletin. You said, I don't see any of this in my bulletin. That was the introduction. How do we apply it to us? 5 places we need humility. We need it for salvation. If we're going to be saved, have our sins forgiven, serve God, go to heaven, we have to humble ourselves. We have to admit our need. See, some people don't, well, I'm already pretty good. I don't know that I need to be saved. So you have to humble yourself and admit you have sinned. You need a Savior. Which really, we all down deep, don't we know that? That we're not perfect. We have sinned. We're talking about almighty, perfect, holy, eternal God. In His presence, can we lie and say, I don't need any forgiveness? No, we can't. We've got to humble ourselves and admit, I need forgiveness. And admit that our inability to do it on our own, that we need, I forget how I worded it, admitting, what's the next one? To save ourselves. So I need salvation, but I can't do it through a bunch of good deeds I do or the money I give. Those are all right things to do, but they don't bring salvation. It's only by casting myself on God. God, I am sorry. I repent from that life. I turn from that life. Forgive me, and I turn to Jesus as my Savior. I accept Him, and I serve Him, and I want you to take me to heaven. You humble yourself. That's the only way we're saved. We need humility and growth. And again, we need to admit our need. If you're a new Christian, you need to admit, I need to grow. If you've been a Christian for 50 years, you need to admit, I still need to grow. Because I've not arrived yet to perfection, to be like Jesus, and so there's still room for growth. I know I've been a Christian for a long time, there's still room for growth. So we have to admit that, and then we need to listen to others, like Naaman did. Listen to others. Listen to your husband or wife. You know how often, most of us here, we don't like to tell anybody anything, do we? We don't want to tell them anything wrong. Or most of us, now there may be a few people who love that, but most of us don't like to give a lot of advice. And so if somebody that's your friend, that loves you, if your parents, if your grandparents, if your husband or wife gives you something, probably better listen. There may be room for growth there, chance for growth, if we'll listen. And then we need humility for service. Now we all should serve. Everybody is a minister, not just a pastor. Every Christian should be ministering. That's a Bible truth. But here's where we're tempted to have pride, is when we judge others that we don't see serving. Maybe we're finally getting into some work. Have you ever talked to a non-smoker? I mean a former smoker who quit smoking? Boy, they talk about smoking people. I can't believe he's smoking. Doesn't he know what that smells? You smoked for 30 years. Sometimes we can be, we do some service and why are they not serving? Well, do you know they're not? We've got to be careful of judging others. We don't know what service they're doing. And it's not us. We're not their master. So we got to avoid that temptation to get proud because of our service, or of that as a temptation to get proud and look down on those we serve. Boy, I can't believe that. We're counseling somebody and I can't believe they're that dumb. That's not a good attitude. It still should be compassion. So all of these areas we're tempted to pride, and we need to humble ourselves. If we're to stand for Jesus and for the truth, we need humility. And we should act. I talk about being brave and be resolute, being an influencer. We absolutely need to stand for Jesus and the truth. But let's do it with humility. We can come across so arrogant if we're not careful. And some people accuse of arrogance even when we're not. But we say, well, Jesus is the way of salvation. Ooh, you're so arrogant. No, that's just the truth. But we need to make sure we say it with humility. I needed it. God forgave me. I'm still working and letting God work on me. And be humble and not come across arrogant when we're standing for the truth. Like we're up here looking down on them. Everybody says, is he going to fall? Is he going to fall? But this, we don't want people, when we're talking to people about Jesus, we don't want to act like, you dirty sinner. You see, I didn't mean to point to you like you were.
It's okay.
Excuse me. Thank you. All right. Compromise to please others, another temptation. And that is a thing of pride. We don't want to look bad. We don't want people to think we're weird. And so we just be quiet about Jesus. It's not popular at work to talk about God. Probably not popular in a lot of places. That's why I say we have to work in God. Help us to stand for Jesus, stand for truth, but do it in a humble way. And includes not compromising. All right, and lastly, leadership. Now, leadership is influence, so we want to influence, so all of us are leading some people, at least they're following our influence. So again, I want us here to say a quote from a book called Good to Great by Jim Collins. Jim Collins writes business books, including the book Good to Great. And he found out in his study of all succeeding businesses that humility was the key in the top leaders, which seems counterintuitive. And so he said this, we found that for leaders to make something great, their ambition has to be for the greatness of the work and the company rather than for themselves. Do you get to see the difference? There's nothing wrong with being a leader who says, we can do it, and we're going to make big and make more money. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with saying our church is going to reach more people, God, we're going to help and do God's work. Nothing wrong with that. As long as you're not in to make you look big. See, he said the great leaders, they're not worried about their own important or looking important. They're worried about the work. And so he says level 5, that's what he calls the top leaders, are a study in duality. Modest and willful. Willful towards getting the job done, but modest about their getting credit. Humble and fearless. See, that's what I'm saying we need to be as Christians. Humble and fearless. Humble and fearless. Get out there and stand for Jesus, but in a humble way, thank God what he did for me. One more quote, and I love this last quote. The difference, he says, between a good leader and a great leader is humility. He just, by studying businesses, and found out what we already knew in the Bible. Humility is a key for us. And I think it's something we all keep fighting all the time. Humble ourselves. I read an interesting story from, of all people, a woman stand-up comedian who is now a Christian. But when she was in college, she was an atheist. And some of her friends were atheists or not in church, and they made sort of fun of religious people. They were all getting ready to go out to a party or something, and they got a call. She's up, I know this is a marketer trying to sell me something. Let's have a little fun. So she turns it on speaker. He says, hey, are your carpets dirty? Did you ever? And he started trying to sell her carpet cleaning. And she says, I don't, and she got a Texas accent, she's making fun. I don't believe in that stuff. Where I go to church, we don't believe in, my religion won't let me clean carpets. You know, and they're all laughing over there. And he said, well, okay, well, I've never heard of that before, but what religion are you? She said, I'm a Christian. Oh, great, I'm a Christian too. What church you go to? She didn't know any church name. She said, the Church of the Bible. Oh, the Bible Fellowship, that's a church I go to. Isn't Pastor Mike great? Yeah. And he starts to tell, and he says, you know, my life was a wreck. I was depressed. I was an alcoholic. My wife was about to leave me. My life was tore up when I gave my life to Jesus, and he forgave me and saved me. And he started crying. His voice started cracking. I've been sober now for 2 years and 26 days. And what God has done for me, and she's looked all down her friend, nobody's laughing. And he said, oh, and he talked about God, and he said, you know, I'm so glad to talk to a Christian. You pray for me, and I'll pray for you. And she said, I'll pray. Well, God bless you. And she said, God bless you. And she got off the phone, and all her friends were silent. It wasn't funny like they thought it was going to be. And she said, when she wrote this years later, I wanted to make him a fool, but I was the fool. And when he came out with such a humble, broken attitude about what God did for him, there was nothing to make fun of. And I left that night wishing I had some of what he had. And of course, years later she did. She became a Christian. I'm telling humility. We're not up here, oh, I've been serving Jesus, I'm so important now, I'm so good now. We're all on the same level. All of us needing God. Let's bow our heads.